It's a tribute to a local fisherman who had died 2 years before. It was Denmark's most celebrated storyteller, Hans Christian Andersen, who directed artist to Skåne. This far-flung corner of Denmark, he wrote, a desert between two roaring seas. Are you a painter? Then make your way up here, for there are motifs enough for you. Today, the former dining room of the local inn is part of the museum. Back in 1874, Michael Ancher was among the first artists to stay here. He fell in love with the innkeeper's sister Anna and married her. Before long, other artists began to gather round the homely dining room table. The Norwegian Peter Krøyer was one of them, and he painted this portrait of Michael Ancher, capturing the man's somewhat brooding personality. The appeal of the Dutch old masters is very clear. The intensity of Rembrandt, the colours of Vermeer, just rediscovered at this time. But there was a fresh impetus, the focus on the hardship of those who live on the sea and often die on the sea. Ancher's fascination for fishermen as a subject for painting reflects a determination that art should make a social statement, that it should be about the tough realities of life and not an academic exercise to hang in polite drawing rooms. The statement is principally about the lot of the working man, and Ancher's painting belongs to that climate of 19th century social conscience, to which the novels of Dickens and Zola also belong, as well as the realism of artists like Daumier, Courbet, and the young Van Gogh, and the new political philosophies of anarchism and Marxism. For Ancher, here are the faces of life's unsung heroes, those who suffer in silence, the salt of the earth. These portraits of grieving fishermen and their families make it clear why this painting is regarded as Ancher's masterpiece. Intensely felt and closely observed, their expressions convey the numbness and bewilderment of loss. There is nothing at the moment to be said. It's too early for tears. Ancher knew them all, just as he knew the dead man, a lifeboat skipper widely famed, Lars Kruse. Closest to him in death are his womenfolk. One composed and dignified, the other distraught. They lift this scene out of a 19th century fishing village and relate it to the central tragedy of the Christian story, the two Marys mourning the dead Christ. Lars Kruse had been one of these. The fame of this group of seamen rested on their prowess in braving what was known to be among the most ferocious seas in Europe, where opposing currents met. It was Kruse who had the decision to make whether to risk the storm or not. No motor, only oars. An open boat launched from the beach. Easy enough posing for the camera in a gentle breeze, but in a storm, hell on water. Then Lars Kruse was in his element. He became the popular hero of all Denmark, knighted and beribboned by royalty. Every child was fed with the story of his tally of 180 people rescued from shipwrecks. And now he was dead. And such irony, he had been out fishing in fair weather. The shock was all the greater. He had seemed invincible. The painting took Ancher 2 years, working from oil sketches he made immediately after the disaster. Lars Kruse's widow, more withdrawn into her own sorrow than in the final composition. And Kruse himself, seemingly untouched, merely asleep, young-looking as people often are in death. The daughter, mystified, facing tragedy with a blank look. In this early sketch, she is dressed in golden brown. Later, the artist put her in darker colours to throw more emphasis on the widow, the central figure among the group of mourners. She now lowers her head in the pain of grief, just as she does in the finished painting. The daughter becomes a protective figure, attendant on her mother, serene and self-effacing. The painting is gradually emerging as a study of people in silence. The more naked expressions of shock are reserved for the men, the other fishermen. In photograph albums, we can still see them in real life, these men who were the heroes of so many of Ancher's works. They're less noble in their looks than the artist painted them, but of what heroes in painting would this not be so? Ancher took ordinary brave men of the sea and turned them into noble sons of nature. This was his vision, and it's what elevates his art. He tried to see them as Rembrandt might have seen them. It's the huge, earthy dignity of Rembrandt which broods over this picture. Every character a simple person, every simple person a hero. It's a Protestant vision. Man alone with his doubts, his tenacity, and his private faith. Ancher himself was like this. His temperament and gifts were ideally suited to portraying Protestant endurance. This is Ancher's portrait of the family he married into, keepers of the now famous inn at Skien, the Brøndum family, in 1900, Christmas Day. A bare room, bare tablecloth with family Bible. Except for Ancher's daughter, they're all in black, like figures in a church pew. Old Mrs. Brøndum, in the center where she belongs, a widow holding the family together, but with a kindly face. It's a portrait full of affection. The artist's sister-in-law, Marie, another defender of the faith, but again, no hint of a male's sneer in the way he looks at her. Or at her sister Hulda, a plain and zealous woman who many a painter might have slightly mocked, but Ancher respected these qualities of faith and moral strength. The youngest sister, Anna, is Ancher's wife. Here's the same outward sobriety, yet there's a warmth and vitality about that look. She's an artist like himself. She's one of the family, yet we sense she does not entirely belong. And standing brightly behind this rank of stern women, the only one with any colour in her clothing, the Ancher's daughter Helga, their only child. Of all the Skien artists, Ancher was one of the few to settle here permanently. The others were mostly summer migrants. As his studio suggests, he acquired success and fame in a long life, living until 1927 when he was approaching 80. Both of them painters, Mikael and Anna, their lives were remarkably close in a marriage which lasted almost 50 years. He was enclosed and retiring, she outgoing and sociable. They became the focus of life in Skien, and their house the hub of a shifting art colony. Ancher rarely travelled and seldom far, but artists from everywhere came here, often staying for long periods while they painted the sea, the flat landscape, and Ancher's beloved fishermen. He was never more assured than when painting them, and he never gave us a more noble account of them than in this scene of mourning for a lost comrade, Lars Kruse. Ancher's deepest talent lay with the spirit of Rembrandt, and the spirit of Rembrandt served him well. The painters who formed the Danish art colony of Skien during the late 19th century shared many preoccupations, and among them was a fondness for this intense, rich blue. It bathes their paintings with a sharp northern light. The artist Anna Ancher called this painting Sunshine in the Blue Room. She was among the most talented of them, and the only one who was actually a native of the fishing village of Skien. Seated in the room is her daughter Helga, again the blue, echoing the blue of the walls, just as the blonde hair echoes the colour of the curtains, and the reddish-brown collar, the tablecloth. Anna Ancher was a natural colourist and applied those colours with a bold brush. Detail is less important than effect. Closer, and you can see that what the girl's doing is crocheting. She's sitting in a pool of sunlight. It's late afternoon. Anna Ancher loved to paint at this hour, and as the eye moves across the picture, you can feel the relish with which she picks out the light effects in this quiet room. The deep shadows, the reflection of a plant outside the window, the density of that blue. Bright blades of sunlight on the carpeted floor, the blue upholstered chair, a small white object. It's the ball of wool the girl is using. Everything is colour. It's no surprise that the painter she felt closest to was Manet. Like Manet, every small object becomes a feast for the eye. A visiting painter once said of her, she was like a ray of sunshine, and there was something in her painting which none of the rest of us possessed to the same degree, a use of colour that was full and ripe. Anna Ancher's parents owned the local hotel in Skien, Brundum's Hotel, and she was born here in 1859. Her guest at that time was none other than Hans Christian Andersen. Mrs. Brundum served a late dinner to their distinguished visitor and then retired, and shortly afterwards gave birth to her fifth child. It seemed to her an omen. Anna's mother always believed that God had special plans for the girl, though at that time, in a remote fishing village, she had no idea what. For Anna, it was a happy omen. As a result of Hans Christian Andersen's visit in the year of her birth, the writer urged painters to come to Skien, to this desert, he described it, between two roaring seas. And among the earliest to take him up was a young artist named Michael Ancher. And in the 1870s, he stayed here at Brundum's Hotel, fell in love with Anna, and married her in 1880. She became a painter, and the two of them remained in Skien for the rest of their lives. It seems to have been a marriage of deep happiness. There was a struggle to earn a living, but Anna helped out at the family hotel. She painted very privately, almost secretly, keeping her pictures hidden away in drawers. Not until 1913, when she was in her 50s, did Anna have her first studio, and she left us this painting of it. She had become quietly well known by this time and highly respected among the other artists in Skien. She was more modest than many of them and more self-assured. She knew her limitations and her strengths. She was at her best in a minor key, light filtering softly through curtains, that lovely powdery blue again, and picking out a spray of garden flowers in a pottery vase on a white tablecloth. Soft colours put together with such a delicate sense of harmony. Her paintings are full of small pleasures, like the way the vase of flowers is entirely in shadow except for one touch of reflected sunlight. And the way this touch of gold on the vase echoes the sunlight as it pours through the window and along the floor of the studio. Her paintings are contemplations of domestic things well loved. Her life, like her appearance, was orderly, well managed. Except on the occasions when she travelled with her husband, each day had its fixed rhythms. Her family, her friends, her work. As a younger woman, she used her mother's small sitting room as a studio, the Blue Room. Old Mrs. Brundum would be resting or preparing dinner in the kitchen. Anna would paint while her daughter Helga played, or read, or crocheted. Always the same contemplation of the domestic scene. Sunlight, reflections, golden yellow, shades and patterns of blue. Her eye follows the movement of light as it catches the polished mahogany of a chair. But she was no recluse. The artists at Skien all liked her. Their wives, too, even when they didn't always like each other. Here's breakfast at Brundum's Hotel. The maestro, Peter Kreuer, holds forth at the head of the table. Anna, in the centre, is among those listening. The hotel was a popular gathering place. Peter Kreuer left us a record of lunch at Brøndum's. Anna's not present, but her husband Mikael is, standing on the left with his shotgun over his shoulder. If he had to choose between lunch and hunting, he would choose hunting. But when Anna painted a lunchtime scene, the subject was characteristically subdued and subtle. Mikael Ancher is again dressed for hunting, but this is not a narrative painting. He's as still as if part of a still life. And to convey that fondness for sunlight and the open air which both of them shared, she has given him a background suggesting sky and clouds, reflections in water, who knows, the magic of afternoon light. Sunlight embalming and transforming whatever it touches. It's the recurring theme of Anna Ancher's paintings. A teapot, just a teapot, seems to float on a sea of sunlight. And under the handle, a touch of that favourite blue. Drinking glasses on the table. Look close and they dissolve into blue, yellow, bronze and white. Brushstrokes describe the light, not the objects.